A deceptive but rather inspiring day when things might not be quite as they seem. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Monday, August the 10th, 2026. There is an opposition today between Venus in Libra and Neptune in Aries. Venus also makes a trine to Pluto in Aquarius, and that is the beginning of a grand trine involving Venus, Pluto and Uranus. So as far as this video is concerned, I will start by giving a broad overview about what is going on astrologically today. I will then look in some detail at Venus opposition Neptune, and then I will do forecasts for the 12 signs, and I will finish this video with an I Ching reading for the day. So let's start off by looking at the horoscope for today, set for noon New York time on Monday, August the 10th, 2026. So here is a chart. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as what is going on today, we have the moon in Cancer. The moon is solidly in Cancer, and the moon is separating from a square to Saturn. So there's the Moon-Saturn square. So Moon at around 20 degrees Cancer, Saturn at 14.5 Aries. So that Moon square Saturn may say something about how we experience today, particularly the first part of the day, particularly if we're in sort of Asia, Australia or New Zealand. I think if you're in the Americas, that moon square Saturn might not be such an important influence, particularly from sort of lunchtime onwards. But it's still something to consider. And so when you've got moon in Cancer square Saturn, moon in Cancer is quite an emotional placement for the moon. I mean, the moon is strong in Cancer, of course, because the moon rules Cancer. But, when it's square Saturn, it might just feel that something is in our way. Something is maybe blocking our progress, at least our emotional progress. And, other people may not be particularly forthcoming. If you're interested in true black moon Lilith, you might also notice then that the moon is opposition true black moon Lilith, and you could say that Saturn is involved in a T-square. So you can see you've got moon in Cancer, opposition true black moon Lilith in Capricorn, Saturn on the T. And so if you've got moon opposition true black moon Lilith, that kind of gives us the idea of, complicated emotions, things which are quite sort of deep, perhaps rooted in the past. And this might be sort of disturbing our equilibrium. And then, Saturn is on the T. So with Saturn square true black moon Lilith, moon square Saturn, it might feel that we are brought to a halt by all of this, and it may not be just our emotions that matter, but other people's as well. But you could say that Saturn represents the answer. Saturn is saying, well, get it together. You can have all these emotions and you can have all these fears, but you've got to get down to reality and do something, remembering that Saturn is in Aries. It might be retrograde in Aries, but it still wants some kind of action. You've got to have a plan to get past these short-term hurdles, these short-term worries. At the same time as all of this is going on, we've got a square between Mercury and Chiron. So Mercury has just gone into Leo, and it's square Chiron at 0 degrees 51 Taurus, and Chiron is retrograde. And so with Mercury square Chiron, this might represent our worries. Mercury is about how we communicate. It's about us wanting to say something, and it might be that Chiron is saying, "Oh, we can't," because of the past, because of something we feel. We're afraid that we might be wounded by what other people say, by what other people, how other people respond to us. And if we don't feel it like that, maybe someone else will. So if people aren't talking, seem to be strangely silent, that might be their concern. So that is the more sort of negative way of looking at Mercury square Chiron. A more positive way of seeing Mercury square Chiron is to see it as a challenge, and to see Chiron as being an energy which likes to do things differently, which likes to disturb, likes to force people to think again. And so Mercury square Chiron could operate in terms of just saying things which are upsetting and are unsettling. And Mercury square Chiron is not just trying to unsettle for the sake of it, it's because there is a reason. There is a reason why people have to be aware of what is going on. Maybe people have been behaving badly. Maybe people have been inflicting wounds, and Mercury square Chiron can force all of this out into the open. Yeah, it means that people are made uncomfortable, but sometimes people have to be uncomfortable. People need to be aware of the situation, and that's perhaps what Chiron wants. And we, additionally, in terms of the inspiration, we have things going on with the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and we also have Venus opposition Neptune and Venus trine Pluto. So that's something I'm just going to talk about in a moment. First of all, let me just switch the chart to Australian time, just mainly to see what the moon is doing. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, here is a chart set for noon Sydney time, and so there is a moon earlier in the sign. So I talked about this moon square Saturn, and I suggested that the moon square Saturn might represent one's fears, or one's feeling that something is blocked, or the reasons why one can't do something. So if you are in Australasia or East Asia, I think that moon square Saturn is possibly going to be quite a sort of a major influence, could be the sort of the main influence through most of the day, certainly up until the evening, which really is most of the day. So it could be a bit of a moon square Saturn day where you're not able to fully see things through, and you may think that something is being held back, especially on an emotional level. But don't worry too much about it. The moon is going to move on, and by tomorrow it won't be such an influence. And then of course the moon will be moving into Leo, and that will change everything. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And from a heliocentric viewpoint, we have Venus square Neptune. So I'm just about to talk about Venus opposition Neptune, which we have geocentrically. So we've got a geocentric Venus opposition Neptune. We've got a heliocentric Venus square Neptune. So, we've got real Venus-Neptune today. And so, with Venus-Neptune, well, I don't want to go on about it right now. Let me just wait until I move back to the geocentric picture. But it can be about relationships, it can be about perceptions in relationships, it can be about fantasy, having hopes about another person, and those hopes might not manifest. It can be quite a disappointing aspect, and certainly that is shown in the heliocentric chart. So I think that's the main thing to discuss. Mercury is starting to make a conjunction to Mars, so we've got this heliocentric Mercury-Mars conjunction forming over the next couple of days, and so Mercury-Mars heliocentrically, that is strong words. People have things to say. They don't mince their words, and it could be a time for being, for being quite vocal. And if something needs to be said, then now might be the time to say it. And then there is Venus opposition Neptune. So here is the chart for the exact aspect. It takes place at 6:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when Venus is exactly opposition Neptune, and so it will take place sort of around lunchtime if you're in Europe. And is that right? No, I'm getting it the wrong way around. If 6:01 p.m. New York time is, of course, going to be 11 p.m. London time. So towards the end of the day, we have Venus opposition Neptune, and it won't be until very late this evening or even into tomorrow, if you're in Europe and the Middle East, that the Venus opposition Neptune is exact. So, Venus opposition Neptune, in general, when you hear Venus opposition Neptune, it can be quite a difficult energy. If you have got transiting Neptune opposition your Venus, it can, encourage you to sort of drift into a fantasy world. You can have beliefs and hopes which often have, little chance of being realized, in reality. And this can be a particular issue when it comes to things like money and relationships. Venus is a ruler of money, it's a ruler of relationships. And so, when Venus is opposition Neptune, we can have high hopes about a new relationship. We might see someone who, I don't know, we could be very attracted to them and have all these kind of fantasies about them. But it's Venus opposition Neptune. It could just all turn into nothing. And trying to imagine what someone else is thinking and doing and having thoughts about them, it can be deceptive and disappointing and worse. And also, as far as money is concerned, Venus, if Venus is the planet of money, then Neptune, we could have high hopes. Oh, it's all going to come together. I'm going to be a millionaire. This is going to really work. Someone's promised me money, they're going to deliver. Venus opposition Neptune, they might not deliver at all. And so it is potentially a disappointing aspect. So if you find yourself having high hopes today about something, just high hopes without any grounding, you just believe, just have faith, it's all going to work, then perhaps prepare yourself for a disappointment. On the other hand, if you're actually doing something about it, if you're actually taking action to make your hopes into something real, then maybe that's a different matter. But the thing about Venus opposition Neptune is it can encourage one to do nothing and to just hope that, it's all going to work out. And where Venus and Neptune are concerned, it very often doesn't work out. And in terms of this particular opposition between Venus and Neptune, Venus is strong. Venus is in Libra. And so you'd think, Venus in Libra can look after itself, and we're trying to make sense of things, and we can do this from a position of strength, but something can undermine it, and that might be how Neptune works. It's quite an undermining influence. It's what people do. People behave in a way that we hadn't anticipated. At the same time, we might have thoughts and worries that just appear from nowhere, and all of this together, they sort of water down our effect, and it might damage Venus to some extent. But it is Neptune. It's not like Venus opposition Saturn. I mean, Venus will be making an opposition to Saturn, quite soon. But with Venus opposition Neptune, if it causes damage, well, maybe it's because of us, because we just weren't able to see it through. Perhaps we're dealing with sort of lazy thinking. So that's Venus opposition Neptune, but it's not the only aspect Venus is making. Venus is also making a trine to Venus. Sorry, Pluto. Venus is also making a trine to Pluto. And so, we've got this Neptune-Pluto sextile. And so what's kind of happening is Venus is starting to line up in terms of a grand trine. Venus trine Pluto, trine Uranus, and Venus opposition Neptune. So we're actually seeing a kite starting to form. So there is the grand trine of the kite, and there is Neptune opposition Venus. And because Venus is opposition Neptune as part of a grand trine, maybe we should be attempting to see Neptune in a more positive way. Maybe I'm being overly negative about Neptune's influence. And, with Venus trine Pluto, that is the capacity to change things. And it can be about working on other people. Perhaps being able to be manipulative. So if we put Venus as not just being opposition Neptune, but also being trine Pluto, and so we can say that Venus is aspecting this whole Neptune sextile Pluto that aspect. So Venus is being influenced by both. Well, perhaps that puts things in a different light, and it suggests that there is a way through. And you might then say, but okay, you've got the issues of Venus opposition Neptune. I mean, I've just talked about them. I think it can be quite a difficult aspect, but the fact that you've got Pluto on, well, it's not like a T-square. I don't know. It's got a name for it. I can't remember what the name is, but where you've got Pluto sextiling one side of the opposition and trining the other side, maybe Pluto is the solution. And, if we want our ideas and our fantasies to be realized, or to have any chance of being realized, then we have to tune into that Pluto. And that Pluto is about being able to change the situation. And it's not just about Pluto, it's also about Uranus, because so Uranus is hitting it as well. So maybe our deep hopes, our hopes for ourselves, our hopes for humanity, our hopes for everything are achievable, but they're not achievable just if we just hang around doing nothing. If we just rely on faith, we can instead perhaps harness the power of Pluto and Uranus. So we have to actually be able to make a real change. But that change has to be in accord with the world as it is, because Uranus and Pluto are these collective energies, and the world is obviously going in a particular direction. So if we align ourselves with the world and we are active in our alignment, then things that we really hope for, maybe they can happen. Maybe we won't be disappointed. And I wanted to just look at this Venus-Neptune opposition in terms of the 90-degree dial, seeing what midpoints it's on. So if we look at the 90-degree dial, we will see that on the 90-degree dial, the Venus-Neptune opposition will be shown as a conjunction. So Venus is gone. Venus is here. There's Venus and Neptune. You see, they're shown as being together, because the 90-degree dial shows oppositions as conjunctions. So the question is, what midpoints is it on? And it's on the Mars-Cupido midpoint, and being on the Mars-Cupido midpoint, I mean, Mars-Cupido is about relationships, and it's about maybe actively pursuing a relationship, trying hard to connect with another person. It may be about an existing relationship, and it could be quite a fortunate pair, Mars-Pluto. And so perhaps this is saying that with Venus and Neptune on the Mars-Pluto midpoint, I think there could be, we could see that in terms of sort of romantic fantasy, but the action is very much there. And the question is, how is that going to work? So it could be about trying to pursue a relationship in an active way, but is that the right thing to do? It could be about romantic delusion, which actually it manifests as actual action. And yeah, that action might be inappropriate, but it may not just be about romance. It might be just about pursuing a link with another person in a very active way, but that action may perhaps, may, as I've said, not being entirely appropriate. So as far as other things going on, it's also on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. And this is something I do want to talk about, Mercury-Uranus, because Venus is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and Neptune is on the Uranus midpoint, and in fact the Sun is as well. So the Sun is kind of making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune, and it's making a semi-square to Venus. So in fact you've got the Sun, Venus and Neptune on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. And so this Mercury-Uranus midpoint is about inspiration. It's about ideas. It's about having sudden ideas that just seem to come from nowhere. And so with all of these planets configured around the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, we're not talking necessarily about fantasy, just thinking about what is possible. So if something suddenly occurs to us, and it's a possibility, a real possibility, then we can make it happen. But we have to, of course, put in the effort, and that means at the very least talking about what is important to us, perhaps trying to be persuasive. And I think we can be persuasive because Venus is trine Pluto. In fact, Venus is part of a grand trine in air signs because it trines Pluto and it trines Uranus. So I think that there is an inspiration here which may be real, and there is an opportunity to turn that inspiration into something really valuable. But it requires effort, not faith. I think that faith with Venus opposition Neptune can be really dangerous. We don't want faith. That is not going to help. I think we need to have knowledge. We have to know that if we get it right, we can make something happen. And that's all I've got to say about Venus opposition Neptune. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, August the 10th, 2026. Aries. There are lots of different things happening. There's something happening here, there's something happening there, and you're not necessarily quite sure what to make of it all. I mean, you can't be in lots of different places at once. For one thing, you just don't have the energy, and you probably don't have the inclination either. The moon is moving through Cancer. It's making a square to Saturn in Aries, Saturn in your sign. And I think that because of this moon-Saturn square, you're just not inclined to get too heavily involved, even though part of you wants to be involved. And yeah, sure, you could suddenly take action. You could impose your will on a particular situation, on several particular situations. But I don't think that's necessarily something that you necessarily want to do. So it's partly a question of evaluating your own strength. I mean, I think that you are actually in a strong position, possibly in a stronger position than you realize. And at the same time, you can see a lot of things which are confusing. The question is, can you take control of them? Or is it just going to stay confusing? And I'm thinking in particular of an opposition aspect between Venus and Neptune. So this Venus-Neptune opposition could just represent one of the many things going on around you, one of the many things that you might want to pay attention to. And, Venus has just moved into Libra, your opposite sign, and Venus in Libra could easily represent another person, or it could represent people in general and how you occur to other people, what kind of impression you're giving. So when you look at Venus, you might want to sort of look at things from another person's perspective. Now, you being an Aries, you have a reputation for being pretty straightforward. You say it as it is. You don't make things up. You don't drift into sort of double speak, and you say one thing and you mean something else. That's not really you, Aries. But Venus opposition Neptune may be describing, how you respond in particular situations. Remember, there's a lot of different things going on around you. When you are put to the test, when you are challenged. And with Venus opposition Neptune, just consider the possibility that, strange as this might sound, you might be making things more confusing. Perhaps through your overall approach. You might not even mean to make things confusing. You might think that you're being completely straightforward, but there's just something about what you do and what you say that may be misconstrued. And so do make sure that you are understood, because people might have sort of misapprehensions. They just might not fully understand what you're saying, what you're doing, and you have that capacity for tying everything up in this sort of elaborate web of confusion. Yes, you can do that, and that is just so un-Aries, but I think that it certainly is a possibility. And Venus opposition Neptune might say something about relationships and whether or not people are being clear, and it could be that there's just something about your presence which is making other people nervous, and if they're getting nervous, they might not give a full account of who they are and what they want, and so this just could create the possibility for a lot of misunderstandings. And so your reaction to this might be to just say, well, in the short term, you just don't want to get involved with people because people are confusing. I think people definitely could be. And so that would be a strategy. But if other people can't be avoided, then, there's not much you can do. You just have to be, as straightforward as you can be, and you can perhaps always ask questions to make sure that the other person has understood, and also to make sure that you have understood. And, it is quite an important aspect. It's this Venus opposition Neptune. Now, it could have a positive note. There may be something about you that is interesting and sort of mysterious. I mean, Neptune is moving through your sign, and it may go further than that, because Neptune in Aries, even though Neptune is retrograde, just is a pointer to Aries. It's a pointer to the possibility that Aries has got some of the answers. I mean, it's arguably your time with Neptune and Aries. I mean, it's not what I think sort of every astrologer says, but I do think there is some evidence for this. What are people looking for right now? People are looking for leadership. That's what people want, and typical Aries can certainly provide leadership because people don't know what to do. They don't know what they want, and if someone can make up their minds for them, then maybe that is something you can do. And so a way of looking at Venus opposition Neptune is to say, well, you can have an impact, and you can be listened to. But on the other hand, Venus is in Libra. With Venus in Libra, don't make the mistake of underestimating anyone. There are certain people in your life who are, stronger than usual, and I think that you need to respect this strength. It doesn't mean to say that this strength is going to work against you, but instead, you have to have an understanding of, what it is that other people are capable of doing. And if you underestimate someone, that could be dangerous. You might make a fool of yourself. If it's a competitive situation, then you certainly don't want to underestimate anyone. People are able to hold firm to what they want and what they believe in, and if it comes to an actual sort of argument or a fight, I don't think you can necessarily count on being the winner. So when it comes to other people, there's certainly a reason to be cautious. And additionally, Venus does make a trine to Pluto, and with Venus making a trine to Pluto, you also mustn't underestimate how much power people can actually demonstrate. People can create changes. You might not think they can create change, but they actually can, and they can do it very, very easily. And going back to yourself, just think about what's happening today, or at least think about what is about to happen. Mars is now right at the end of Gemini. Mars is at 29, 30 something Gemini. It's just getting ready to move into Cancer. And this does say something about you and your attitude and where you stand. And normally Aries, as I've said, has a reputation for being very definite, but it might be difficult to be definite when Mars is on the verge of changing sign. Mars, in that last degree of Gemini. I mean, I know that there is a view that the last degree of the sign is unfortunate. I mean, that is not a view I really sign up to. But still, when Mars is the end of Gemini, right at the end of Gemini, it kind of suggests that you're moving from one stage to another. Mars is in Gemini, Mars is in air sign, Mars is in a mutable sign. That says something about the recent past. You can deal with a fair amount of variety, and you can move from one topic to another. But then Mars moving into Cancer, completely different. Mars is in a water sign, and the emotional side of things could become more important. And this whole period, or this time over the next couple of days, Mars is on the solstice point, and with Mars on the solstice point, in spite of what I said about Venus opposition Neptune, you yourself are actually quite definite. You have a fairly definite understanding of what is happening around you, and you feel that you should really engage with it, that you should do something. Now, you might, perhaps there's some initiative you want to take with Mars on the solstice point, but you just don't forget the Moon is square Saturn. And, with Moon square Saturn, if there's something you really feel you want to do, I actually absolutely get it. And there may be lots of different things you want to do because, as I said at the beginning of this piece, there's something happening here, there's something happening there. A lot of things require your attention, but I would nonetheless suggest that you wait until tomorrow. I think that tomorrow, Tuesday, I think that things are going to be easier. The moon will be out of Cancer. You won't have that moon square Saturn to worry about. In fact, you'll have the moon in Leo making a conjunction to Mercury. So I think, Aries, that tomorrow, Tuesday, is going to be a better day than today. And if you decide that you don't really want to do anything of great significance today, Monday, I think that's absolutely understandable, and it's quite possibly the right approach. Taurus. Mercury is making a square to Chiron, and this square could affect you. I mean, after all, Chiron is in Taurus. Chiron is retrograde in Taurus. It won't be long before Chiron moves out of Taurus and moves back into Aries. But with Mercury square Chiron, that is about the way you are thinking and the way you are thinking about yourself. And there's just a possibility with Mercury square Chiron that you might feel, ever so slightly sorry for yourself. You might be aware of, something that has happened in the past or something you've just been lumbered with, and you don't really want to have to deal with it, but you don't feel that you necessarily have a choice. And, when we think about Mercury, Mercury has recently changed signs. It was in Cancer. Now it's in Leo, and so with Mercury in Leo, that does say where your thoughts are heading, where they are going, and a lot of your thoughts are perhaps connected with the past and what has happened in the past. And so when you've got Mercury square Chiron, that might encourage you to really focus on perhaps wounds from the past. Something's happened that you're perhaps brooding a bit on the subject. And Mercury additionally is starting to make an opposition to Pluto. That Mercury opposition Pluto is not exact right now, but it's moving towards exactitude. And in fact, we have got a T square developing involving Mercury, Pluto, Chiron, and so it's kind of worth thinking about what that is, what's that about. And Mercury opposition Pluto, there is something increasingly intense about your general approach, and maybe you're thinking about what you need to do to be successful. That may be one way of doing it, or focusing on things. And what is your attitude to authority? And I think that you're quite aware right now of authority. You're thinking about authority. You're thinking perhaps about people that maybe have more power than you do, and that does bother you, but you kind of want to change the situation. And if you feel that someone else has more power than you, then perhaps that's a power that you can take, that you can basically integrate into yourself, because Pluto is moving through Aquarius. Aquarius is an important sign in the Taurean chart, and so it is a time between now and the 2040s when you can really assert yourself. And maybe this Mercury opposition Pluto is starting to remind you of what you could do if you had the opportunity. But then with Chiron square Mercury, you might be thinking about all the reasons why you can't do it. What has happened, and a sense of I don't want to use the word victimhood, but just feeling just ever so slightly hard done by, and that might be how Chiron sees the situation. But, if we're talking about Chiron, we are talking about a maverick energy. It might have all sorts of things to be upset about. It might have grudges. It might feel sorry for itself. But all of those feelings are the inspiration for positive action. And that's perhaps why Chiron can be associated with the maverick energy. And so if you want to do something different or say something different, make that difference part of the whole way you occur to the world, then I think you can. And that is a resolution of the T-square. The planet on the T, Mercury square Pluto, Chiron square Pluto, Chiron square Mercury, and that Chiron Mercury square is exact today. I think it's exact at 6:15 this morning on Monday morning London time, so a bit earlier, or even last night if you're in the Americas. But I wouldn't worry too much about the exact time in which that Mercury Chiron square is forming. It just does mean that you have the opportunity to perhaps be different and to come over in a sort of a different way. And Venus, after all, is your ruler, and Venus is making a trine to Pluto, and Venus trine Pluto. That's perhaps what you should be focusing on. I mean, Venus is opposition Neptune as well. And maybe you've got a choice with those two aspects. Venus trine Pluto is the more positive aspect, the more constructive aspect. When you think about Venus trine Pluto, you think about changing things. It's a transformative energy. If you're not happy with something, then you can maybe sort of overturn it. And Venus trine Pluto, perhaps Taurus, gives you the opportunity to just look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, the way you fill your time, the rituals, the structure that you are creating, and just to overturn the whole thing in a very sort of gradual way. And if you do that, that can actually be quite empowering, because I think empowerment is quite important. With that T square I've just been talking about, somehow you just don't necessarily feel that you have as much power as you deserve. And yes, you might be resentful about certain aspects of the past, but Venus trine Pluto does indicate that you can take the initiative and you can make the changes. And if you make those changes in your daily life, that feeds into everything else and allows you to really assert yourself in a new way and create the transformations that you are really yearning to make. Venus does make an opposition to Neptune as well, and I could say that you should maybe discount that Venus opposition Neptune. I mean, it depends on your attitude. And I was recently, well, not recently, very recently, I made a video about Stephen Forrest, the astrologer Stephen Forrest, and he's been getting into trouble through what he's said and so forth. But I was also thinking about a particular approach to astrology, this idea that astrology is about sort of free will, which I think that Stephen Forrest represents. And if you watch my videos, you'll know that I'm quite skeptical about the idea of free will. On the other hand, part of what astrology is about taking the horoscope and looking at the symbolism of what is going on, and perhaps making a conscious choice. I think that's kind of what Stephen Forrest represents. So there's also, there are other astrologers who perhaps take a sort of a similar approach. If there's Jeffrey Cornelius, he wrote a book on this subject. He kind of sees astrology as more about sort of as about divination, and the astrologer's role is to take the dynamic, constructive thing in the chart and to make it real and perhaps to de-emphasize things which are not necessarily constructive for the client. So what this kind of links to these two aspects, Venus opposition Neptune and Venus trine Pluto, I would probably encourage you to go with the Venus trine Pluto and not to get caught up with Venus opposition Neptune and its negativity. So you could say, from a free will perspective, Venus, you don't have to get involved with Venus opposition Neptune. You could say that, but I think it's something you do have to be aware of. Venus opposition Neptune, Venus is trying to make things as simple, as straightforward as possible. In Libra, it just wants a natural balance. It doesn't want any complications. It's Venus in Libra. Venus in Libra is a very civilized placement. But then it's opposition Neptune, and so Venus opposition Neptune can be about things from the unconscious, things that you're not necessarily completely aware of. Don't forget, I have got Taurus rising myself, so. Perhaps to an extent I'm talking to myself as well as I'm talking to you. But, there are things from your unconscious which just could mess things up. And they could just make things more complicated than they need be. And so, for example, if you have got careful plans and you think you've got it all sorted out, things could just appear from nowhere. They could appear from yourself, and they could threaten to complicate things. But I don't think that is necessary. I think that you have to be aware of that possibility. But just because you think something or feel something doesn't mean to necessarily say that you have to go with it. And at the same time, Taurus, I think it is a time when you are quite inspired. And so, yes, your unconscious can come up with some negative and confusing stuff, but it can also come up with some really stuff that is really inspiring. You have got a good mind. I've been telling you this for some time. And your brain is on good form, and you can see things in a new way. And you can perhaps be inspired, and this inspiration can be reflected also in what you say. I think if you're in conversation, then you don't have to stick to the straight and narrow. If you want to say what's on your mind, if you want to come up with your interesting solutions and theories, then I would suggest you go for it, because actually you've got something very interesting and, yes, inspiring to say. Gemini. Mercury is in Leo, and that has been an important sign change. And with Mercury in Leo, this does this does say something about you. I mean, it's good to have Mercury in Leo rather than Cancer, perhaps. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Mercury being in Cancer, but now that Mercury is moving into Leo, I think you're perhaps changing the way you are operating. Leo is a fire sign. It's a sign that, can be quite proud. And ideally, you will be feeling good about yourself and what you can achieve, and indeed what you have achieved. And this can be reflected in the way you explain yourself. When you talk about yourself and what you're doing and what you're planning, you maybe sort of demand a certain amount of respect. And it's not because you're arrogant. There's nothing wrong with having a high opinion of yourself, provided it's got some bearing on in sort of reality. You don't want to have a high opinion of yourself for something that you're not very good at. So do concentrate on what you are good at. But I do think that with Mercury in Leo now, I think that you are ideally becoming sort of more confident, and you want to be in places where you're your ego is boosted to some extent, and in different places have different atmospheres, different environments. There are some places where you're going to receive a lot of support, and there are other places where people couldn't care less. And at the moment, Gemini, I think that you do need a bit of praise. It makes things more real, and if no one notices you, if you're ignored, well, that's not particularly healthy, is it? Particularly now. But Mercury is making a square to Chiron, and this square, Mercury square Chiron, is arguably the main aspect of the day. I mean, I know that Venus is opposition Neptune, but for you, Mercury opposition Chiron says something, about the way you feel and how you perhaps relate to the past. And with Mercury square Chiron, you might feel that somewhere along the line something did go wrong. You weren't maybe treated well, or that there's some cause for complaint. And now the question is, what do you do with this? Now, you could just keep complaining. You could feel sorry for yourself, and there is apparently some reason for Geminis to feel sorry for themselves with Mercury square Chiron. But as I always say, Chiron is the maverick. Chiron likes to do things differently, perhaps through its own experience, perhaps through Chiron, through its experience of being wounded, of being rejected, has developed a particular way of relating to the world, and that's where the maverick comes in. And so it might be, Gemini, that the maverick energy is quite strong, that you want to say something which is perhaps controversial. You want to cause a stir. You want to shake people out of their complacency, and it sort of comes from nowhere. And it perhaps also links with the fact that Mercury is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that conjunction to Jupiter, it's a bit of a way off. It's 8 degrees away, 7 or 8 degrees away. So it's quite a subtle influence at the moment, but it is developing. And I think, Gemini, you do really feel that you have something to say or something to contribute, which is very unique. And now might be your moment, or it could be your moment, because some Geminis are having second thoughts. They can see the capacity for speaking freely, their own capacity for speaking freely. But at the same time, they are aware of a certain distance to to everyone. I mean, that can be a Gemini thing. I mean, Geminis do like to think of sort of I and you, them and us, how you might be different from other people, but it could perhaps be stronger than usual. You are thinking about separation, and the separation theme kind of goes against what I've just been saying. Yeah, sure, you can and should speak freely, even if speaking freely isn't to everyone's liking. But there is also that feeling of separation, and maybe the separation is actually linked to what you say and what you communicate and how people respond. Some Geminis might want to test the boundaries. You say something that is unexpected, and how people respond is important. If people are upset by what you say, well, that certainly creates a bit of separation, doesn't it? It creates some distance. But if people are accepting of your individuality, well, then it's a completely different matter. So yes, you might have an opportunity to put people to the test through what you say, and if people can accept what you say, then they are worth bothering with. So that's certainly a way of looking at what's going on today. Now, one thing we do have is a square between the Moon and Saturn. The Moon is in Cancer, it's square Saturn in Aries, and with that square, you might feel that from a money point of view, something is holding you back. Because Moon in Cancer, it is a time when Geminis are thinking about what they have and what the financial obligations are, the obligations that are coming up, that are just appearing on the horizon. And I don't know, as you think about the various things, the various demands, maybe there's another monthly payment. Maybe last month was fine. There's yet another monthly payment and another monthly payment, and that kind of thing can get you down. And also, there's perhaps the attitude of people and their approach to money, what they're saying about money, and that might be of some concern to you. Particularly at the beginning of the day. Maybe if you're in the Americas, it's just not going to be quite as strong as if you're, say, in Europe and Australasia. But it is a matter of degree. And so yes, Gemini, money could be something that is slightly irritating. It could get you down, but the Moon in Cancer. It's not going to stay in Cancer for much longer. It does move into Leo tomorrow, Tuesday. One other thing, Mars is basically leaving your sign. This is the pretty much I think the last day in which Mars is in Gemini, because Mars is on the absolute verge of entering Cancer. Let me just tell you when exactly Mars enters Cancer. Yeah, Mars enters Cancer tomorrow, Tuesday, at 9:30 a.m. London time. So this is the last day of Mars in Gemini, and so you're perhaps in a position where it might be your last chance to say something. Mars in Gemini is you at least to say something in quite a violent way. Violent, no, not necessarily violent, but with Mars in Gemini, you can communicate with power and intensity, and there can be something rather sort of explosive about the way you've been communicating with Mars in Gemini. And Mars in Cancer, kind of a very different energy. So maybe there's a last chance, or maybe it's been about restraint. Mars in Gemini isn't all good. I mean, Mars has been perhaps quite an aggressive energy, and there have been things that you have been annoyed about. I'm not saying that's the way I have felt. I mean, I've got my sun in Gemini, but it's certainly stirred things up, and maybe Mars in Gemini having stirred things up. When it leaves Cancer, when it leaves Gemini, moves into Cancer. Well, it could be a question of job done. You've gone through the Mars experience, and that has perhaps perhaps made you more vibrant, and now you just have to put it all into action in a constructive way. And that's something to perhaps to think about over the next week or so, as Mercury, your ruler, moves towards a very fortunate conjunction to Jupiter. But I'll be talking about that soon enough. Cancer. Moon is continuing its movement through your sign. So in fact, the Moon will be in Cancer all day. And with the Moon in Cancer, it's always good for you by and large. I mean, the Moon is in its own sign. You're feeling a strong sense of who you are and what your limitations are as well. I mean, your emotions are finely tuned. You know what could upset and distract you, and so you can just hold on to what you know and what you trust. But the moon does make one aspect of significance, and that is a square to Saturn. And it is making the square to Saturn on a Monday, the beginning of a week. And so with Moon square Saturn, that can be an aspect which is quite ambitious in its own way. I mean, at least from a Cancerian perspective. So you're very aware of what needs to be done. So, with Moon in Cancer, you're sort of minding your own business, you're enjoying things, you're just trying to be yourself, but then Saturn challenges you. And Saturn is a challenge perhaps from the outside. Outside forces as kind of telling you to sort of get yourself together, that there are things you need to engage with, perhaps relating to your ambitions or your work or something like that. And so it's not an easy aspect, Moon square Saturn, but I think for you it's quite a motivating aspect. It means that you realize what is important. And additionally, we have Venus opposition Neptune, and this Venus-Neptune opposition, that could certainly have an impact on you. As we know, Venus is now in Libra. It's a sign which is related to stability, particularly in the Cancerian horoscope. So with Venus in Libra, you're trying to create stability and normalcy around you, and it kind of has a vaguely similar message to the Moon in Cancer. So Moon in your sign, Venus in Libra. You're trying to sort things out in your own way. You're trying to be comfortable, but there is that challenge we saw with Moon is making a square to Saturn, and then likewise with Venus, it's making an opposition to Neptune. So Neptune is kind of trying to encourage you to do something, to go further in some particular area. And it might be that there is a temptation to move from a world that is safe to one which is confusing, where you don't fully know the rules. And you perhaps have to be careful if you listen too much to people who are demanding authority. Maybe they are actual authority figures. They might be wannabe authority figures. They might be kind of suggesting that you take a particular course of action, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should just hold firm. With Venus in Libra, you're sorting things out at a sort of a fairly sort of fundamental level. This might be about the way you feel. It might be about what you're trying to construct in your own home or in your own immediate environment. And why get distracted? And so perhaps Cancer, the best approach is just to hold firm, hold to what you believe in. Sure, you must not forget your ambitions. If there are things that you want to achieve, you're not achieving them because you're being told to achieve them, because someone else is projecting their values onto you. You're achieving them with that Moon square Saturn because you want to, because you know it's important. So that's perhaps of a difference. It's always about you, or at least it should be about you. And if you feel that outside forces are just encouraging you to do something that you don't really want to do, then probably it is best to hold firm or just to look the other way. You're not going to get involved. One other thing, Mars is on the verge of entering your sign. Mars is in the last degree of Gemini. Tomorrow it moves into Cancer, and so having Mars in Cancer is something that you should perhaps get ready for. Mars in Cancer can be quite disruptive for you. I mean, Mars is quite an angry, energetic influence, and as Mars approaches the solstice point, the solstice point being 0 degrees Cancer, you're starting to feel it. You're starting to feel the fact that some new energy is starting to move into your life. Now, this can be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, but it's something that I will be discussing in more detail when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, Tuesday. Leo, things are looking pretty good for you at some level. I mean, after all, Mercury is now in your sign. We've got Mercury, Jupiter, and the Sun in Leo, plus the South Node. So you start the week in arguably quite a strong position, having a lot of power, and it does get more so because tomorrow, Tuesday, we've got the Moon moving into Leo. So tomorrow we're going to have 4 planets plus the South Node in Leo. So that might be something to look forward to. But while the Moon is in Cancer, that might indicate that maybe there's nothing you necessarily have to do today. Moon in Cancer is quite a reflective influence, and so you might feel that you just want to just continue the weekend just into sort of one more day. Maybe you should regard Tuesday as the beginning of a week, not Monday. So, I mean, that is a possibility, because having the Moon still being in Cancer, and the Moon is making a square to Saturn, it might be that it's just best to wait until Tuesday before really starting things off. Although, let's not forget, while we're talking about beginnings and endings, we do have an eclipse coming up, and maybe that's an eclipse that really does need to be managed. Of course, when you've got an eclipse, you've got the Sun and the Moon coming together at 20 degrees Leo, and this eclipse is on it's on Wednesday, isn't it? So in terms of real new beginnings, starting afresh, brand new initiatives, maybe you should wait until after the eclipse. I mean, I said it is a good eclipse, I think, potentially for you, Leo, because it is in Leo. I mean, I know that eclipse, it sounds heavy, total eclipse, but just because you said total eclipse, it doesn't mean it's bad. I think actually for you, it can be something really, really, really quite powerful. But still, you've got Mercury now in Leo, and so I think you have a clear sense of who you are, and your thoughts are going in the right direction. I think you're becoming sort of increasingly confident, and it's good for Leo to be confident. I mean, Leo should be a confident sign. It should believe in itself, not believe in itself out of arrogance, but just believing in yourself because you're honest about who you are and what you can do and what you can do well, and about what distinguishes yourself from other people. What makes you special, and something that could make you special is just your own ideas. You have ideas, and it's not just because Mercury is moving into Leo. I mean, that's part of it, because Mercury is a planet relating to the mind and how we think. And so with Mercury in Leo, you're feeling good about some of your thoughts. But, it goes further than that. I think, Leo, you can actually be quite inspired. You have some really quite amazing thoughts and amazing perspectives, and something might just occur to you, just out of nowhere. It just occurs to you, and once it occurs to you, you're thinking, well, that's pretty amazing. That could be a big prospect for you. Suddenly you see what you could do, and it just happens perhaps in an instant. It's not like you spend ages and ages trying to think about how it's going to work, and you try to create a good idea out of it, with your own effort and energy. No, it just happens. You just have that inspiration. And so I think, Leo, you are in quite an inspired frame of mind. So that is really something to utilize. And if something occurs to you, don't just discard it. Write it down, see what it says about your life and your plans for the future. Additionally, we do have a square between Mercury and Chiron, and it's exact today, and it's certainly relevant to you because Mercury is, as I've just said, Mercury's just entered Leo, and Chiron is in Taurus. It's retrograde in Taurus, but let's not get too worried about the fact that Chiron is retrograde. In fact, next month it moves back into Aries. But for the moment, it's in Taurus, and Mercury is making a square to Chiron, and that might say something about how you perceive your direction. And from a specifically career perspective, if that is relevant, for some Leos with Chiron in Taurus may feel that some direction is being denied to them, something they want that is just not being given to you. And this is not just about having a job, it's just about having a set of ambitions, targets, goals, things you want to achieve. But with Mercury, with Chiron in Taurus, this has been a time when you might have felt sorry for yourself, when you felt that you weren't able to do everything that you should have been able to do. And now that Mercury is making a square to Chiron, that might become increasingly evident. You're thinking about it, and you're thinking about what is holding you up, and there is a way forward. I mean, Chiron encourages you to think outside the box. I mean, that is Chiron the Maverick. You think outside the box. You even communicate outside the box. You say things that are unexpected, that people don't necessarily want to hear. But in the process of doing that, you do make an impact. And so with Mercury square Chiron, it's important not to just feel sorry for yourself. You need to take things to the next step. You need to the next stage. Okay, you might feel sorry for yourself, but then the question is, what do you do about it? How do you change the situation? How do you right the wrong? How do you really stand out as someone important, as someone who really can contribute? And perhaps the best way of doing that is to be disruptive. Not disruptive in a negative way, just destroying things for the sake of it, but just doing something that makes everyone think, that forces people to take you seriously. Virgo. Mercury is square Chiron. I was just telling Leo that Mercury was square Chiron, and I'm telling you that as well. And why am I telling you that as well? Because Mercury is your ruler, and so if your ruler is square Chiron, that could have quite an impact on you. And so with Mercury square Chiron, there's certainly a negative way of looking at that aspect. And there's a positive way. I mean, starting with a negative way, I mean, with Mercury square Chiron, it is possible that you feel, slightly sorry for yourself. You feel that you can't fully express who you are, that you're kind of being forced to keep things to yourself, and you're just aware that something is just holding you back. Perhaps the past is holding you back. There are things you would like to do. There are things you would like to reach for, but because of circumstances beyond your control, well, there's nothing you can do about it, and it might be that might be a wound connected to just not being able to experience the world in all its vibrancy and variety. Yeah, you'd like to experience it all, but it just might feel with Mercury square Chiron that you are being held back, that the wound is holding you back. But, that's just one way of looking at it. Yeah, and Chiron is about being potentially radical, being different, being able to kind of shake things up. And so with Mercury square Chiron, you have the capacity to have an impact. But perhaps if you want to have an impact, you have to kind of go against Virgo's better judgment. Virgo as a sign, does like to do things in a way that is, by the book, fairly straightforward. You don't want any surprises. Particularly now when there are no planets in Earth signs. So with no planets in Earth signs, things might just seem completely ungrounded, and you're trying to create some kind of stability. And I'm suggesting that you try to destabilize things even further. I mean, it's not that you're trying to destabilize things across the board, but with Mercury square Chiron, it might be you can do something unexpected that just comes from nowhere. It almost feels like it's coming from your unconscious, and you just do something, you say something, you suggest something, and you can kind of surprise yourself by what you say and what you suggest. But in the process of doing that, you are able to move everything along, and people have to notice, people have to pay attention. And additionally, you are creating a situation where the truth can reveal itself. And by the truth, I'm talking about the things that belong to you, the things that are part of you, and the things that you don't need anymore. And this could well be about your social milieu. Who do you spend your time with? Who do you give your energy to? And it just could be a time when some Virgos are looking for endings. You can see how certain things have gone far enough, and they can't go much further. So it might be a time for breaking ties with certain people, certain situations, because you can see that it's no longer doing you any good. And it's not necessarily super harmful, but if you want to make the most of everything, then you should be seeking perhaps new people, new contacts, or perhaps concentrating your energies on people and situations that are constructive, that are supportive of who you are. So if you are feeling about breaking ties or loosening ties, then now might actually be quite a good time to do it. And in general, Virgo, I think at the moment you may well be sort of enjoying your own company. I don't think there's any great necessity for you to be out there in the world, being super sociable, not least because that things are serious, not just because of Mercury square Chiron. It's also the fact we've got Mercury moving towards an opposition of Pluto. So Mercury opposition Pluto, it does make you quite intense. You do have serious thoughts about serious things, and there may be issues about power and whether or not you have enough power. So that's certainly something to be thinking about, Virgo. So in general, it is potentially quite a complicated day, and I think discernment might be important. Discerning, what matters to you, what is relevant, which people matter, and then there are going to be other people who are just or other situations that are just a waste of time. At least for the moment, they're they could be a waste of time. So in a way, it could today might be about sorting the wheat from the chaff, as they say, and really focusing on what matters, on what is life affirming for you. Libra. Venus it's still in your sign. In fact, it's only just moved into your sign. It doesn't leave your sign for another month. I think it's September the 10th that Venus moves out of Libra and into Scorpio. And Venus is making an opposition to Neptune. And this Venus opposition Neptune, I think it's an important aspect, particularly if you're a Libra. And this aspect is really, it's right across the main axis of your chart. So, Libra plays Aries, Neptune in Aries, Venus in Libra. So that Neptune could well be a confusing influence. It makes things difficult to understand. It makes certain people difficult to understand. You're trying to make sense of things. You're actually, Libra, in a pretty strong position right now. I mean, after all, Venus is in your sign, and you can be very sort of constructive, and you have a strong sense of balance, and you know what makes you feel happy. But then Neptune can just be a potentially difficult influence. It could be that certain people are just confusing. Neptune in Aries, you can't work them out. They say things that really don't really make sense, and they take clear water and they just make it completely muddy. And there might then be an argument for saying that you should steer clear of other people, particularly if these other people are confusing and you don't know what to think. But you have to be careful here of projection, because Neptune in Aries can be about your perceptions of other people, but perhaps projecting your own issues onto them, perhaps projecting your own confusion onto them. So if there's something that you don't understand, you can't make sense of it, there's just a possibility that you dump that onto another person. You say, well, it's not you who's confused, it's the other person who's confused, it's the other person that's not making themselves clear. So I think that with Venus opposition Neptune, there's certainly grounds for a certain amount of honesty with yourself, and ask yourself, how might you be muddying the water? And it's probably unnecessary to muddy the water, because Venus is in Libra, as I just said. Venus is strongly placed in Libra, so there's no reason why you can't have clarity. Indeed, there's no reason why you can't demand clarity, both from yourself and from other people. And one aspect that we have today, which is relevant to you, is Venus trine Pluto. And so we've got this question, should we be looking at Venus opposition Neptune, or should we be looking at Venus trine Pluto? And I was talking to Taurus about this issue, because Taurus, like you, has Venus as its ruler, and I was suggesting to Taurus that there may be an element of choice, and I'm kind of saying the same thing to you. Do you want to dwell on the confusions and the uncertainty of Venus opposition Neptune, or do you want to start to think about Venus trine Pluto? Venus trine Pluto, in fact, Venus is starting to make a grand trine, because Venus is beginning to make a trine to Uranus, and so over the next few days there is this grand trine in air signs involving Venus. You're already picking up on it, and it's a very energetic grand trine. And Uranus and Pluto are these powerful outer planets. They represent perhaps the concept of freedom, being able to completely move away from something and to find something new. And so by focusing on the Venus trine Pluto, you're focusing on this this grand trine which is getting stronger and stronger. And so Venus trine Pluto means that you can actually create change. And if you create change, you might also be creating clarity. So yeah, Venus opposition Neptune seems to be a confusing influence, but it needn't be a confusing influence, particularly if you give priority to Venus trine Pluto. And so that might be about you, through the power of your personality, just being able to create the necessary transformation to just make yourself feel comfortable. But you could say that Neptune and Pluto should be just seen as a single thing. Like you got Neptune sextile Pluto, Venus is picking up on Neptune, and the fact that Venus is picking up on both Neptune and Pluto at once, well, that may say something different. It could be, Libra, that at the moment you are picking up on some quite serious planetary energies which they might feel a bit dangerous, but they could both be empowering. And at its best, even the Venus Neptune opposition can actually be about an understanding of something that might be confusing, but you can really get to the bottom of things. You just can feel it, you just know it. And then you've got Venus trine Pluto as well, means that you can take this emotional and spiritual understanding of something and just turn it into something else, and really create a very positive transformation. So there's perhaps a lot to work with there. And it kind of sounds a bit confusing, perhaps a bit of an exaggeration, but you want to go as far as you can, and maybe this is a time when you can harness the transpersonal energy of the Neptune-Pluto sextile and use it to make your life more fulfilling. And yes, it can perhaps help you make the transformation that at some level you feel is necessary. Scorpio. Right now, Scorpio, Mars is really on the brink. Absolutely on the brink. Because tomorrow Mars changes sign. I'm just telling you this. I know I've told you this before, but it's really close now. And so, Mars changing sign, Mars moving into Cancer, I think that is a real positive. I mean, I know that Mars is fallen in Cancer, but in Cancer, Mars does rule the water sign, so it's not bad from your perspective, Mars moving into Cancer. And I think that when that sign change happens, you're going to be feeling more optimistic, and you'll start to see that there are more opportunities are available. The world will, I think, seem more sort of interesting and exciting, and you can sort of perhaps take everything that you have experienced while Mars was moving through Gemini, and actually utilize it. Additionally, Mars is on the solstice point. Whether it's just before 0 degrees Cancer, right at the end of Gemini, or whether it's right at the beginning of Cancer. Yeah, it's on the solstice point, and the solstice point, it's a point of power, and that's what it is, and it can be a point of your power, and you perhaps being able to channel, the power of the universe, or at least the power of the world, and you can address the world. You understand the world at some level. Well, you are a Scorpio. I mean, Scorpios kind of know what's going on, and so that does give you an advantage. Yet you might not feel that you have an advantage today because Mercury is square Chiron. So, Mercury square Chiron is an aspect which could feel limiting. I mean, you think about it. Mercury's moving through. Mercury's just moved into Leo. I mean, this is about who you are. It's about how you want to present yourself, particularly how you want to present yourself in public. That's great, but Mercury square Chiron, there's something challenging you there. There's something holding you back. There might be even a certain self-consciousness to Mercury square Chiron. It may be, Scorpio, that certain people are bugging you. Certain people's influence, you can feel it. You can feel their influence. And that feeling doesn't feel entirely comfortable. When we're talking about Chiron, yeah, sure, you can talk about wounds. You can talk about, feeling wounded by the self-consciousness that is caused by other people, and perhaps that self-consciousness says something about the past as well. Perhaps you were in environments where you couldn't fully express yourself, and that was a pain. I mean, a real pain. And now the situation might appear to be repeating itself, but that is your subjective view. Just because something has happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen in the future and in the present. And so I think that you have to kind of work through that self-consciousness. And I suspect that it's not the case that anyone is really holding you back. I think it just might be just your perception. And remember that Mercury in Leo is actually starting to move towards a conjunction to Jupiter, and that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, it's 7 degrees out, so it's getting stronger and stronger from now on. And I think that is something that you can very much use, and it is about you starting to feel increasingly optimistic. You start to see what is possible, and so that is a positive. But even in the short term, Scorpio, I know you might think that there are many reasons why you can't take action, or why you can't fully be yourself, but you may have a chance today to just do something just out of the blue. You're minding your own business, and then just something happens, and you can say, there's an opportunity here, and you take that opportunity, and you straight away see the benefits, and that kind of links back with the fact that Mars is on the solstice point. Mars on the solstice point does mean that you can be very dynamic, and active. Mars on the solstice point. But a lot of astrologers don't think about the solstice point. About this was a point that Alfred Witter and the Uranian school made use of. I'll just give you an example. Well, not an example. So to give you an idea about the solstice point. So the solstice point is a power point, because it's square the Aries point. So from a perspective, for example, of Uranian astrology, the Hamburg school, that's what the Aries point is about. And so as far as what it means for Mars to be on the solstice point, I just want to give you the view of Witter in his Rules for Planetary Pictures. It's a great book. I would recommend it. And he says of Aries Mars, he simply says, labor, the forces of nature, injuries. Now, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the injuries. Sure, there is a possibility of injuries, but that's not really what it's about, I don't think. I think the forces of nature is more what you should be thinking about in terms of what Witter says. And the forces of nature, it might then say, well, you yourself can be a force of nature with Mars on the Aries point. If we take Witter's description and we work it through to fit what's going on today, and if you can be a force of nature, well, what can stop you? Sagittarius. Right now, Sagittarius, we have the moon moving through Cancer. And that means, with the moon moving through Cancer, that in some respects things might be a little bit low-key, perhaps also a bit complicated. I mean, the moon in Cancer is making a square to Saturn, which is not really very inspiring. And when you think about Saturn, well, Saturn is in Aries, and it's in a fire sign, and so Saturn is about perhaps what you should be focusing on, what what is important, and also what you enjoy. Yes, Saturn can be about enjoyment in this case, but you are having your doubts with moon in Cancer. Moon in Cancer square Saturn in Aries. There are all sorts of reasons why something can't be, something can't happen, because things are complicated, and if things are complicated or seem to be complicated, then that kind of holds you back. And being a Sagittarian, that's just not what you want to hear. Now, fortunately, the moon does not stay in Cancer for very long. I mean, tomorrow the moon will move into Leo, move into a fire sign, and I think that things are going to be just a lot easier tomorrow. So I think tomorrow is going to be a better day than today. And aside from that, we do have Venus making a trine to Pluto, and making starting to make a trine to Uranus, and it's making an opposition to Neptune. So this Venus-Neptune opposition, it affects everyone. And as far as you're concerned, Venus-Neptune opposition, I think, with Venus in Libra, it could be a time, Sagittarius, where you would like to be with other people. I mean, it's quite a sociable place for Venus in Libra, and you want to perhaps enjoy other people's company if you have opportunities to socialize, even though it's just the beginning of a week. The week just hasn't just started; it has only just started. But you're aware of, at the very least, of you and your role in society. And but the thing is that if you try to be too sociable, then that kind of undermines your own individuality, and it becomes increasingly apparent. So the more comfortable you are in other people's presence, the more easy it is, the more you are kind of underplaying who you are. And so there is an incredible price to social activity. Social activity at the moment could really undermine your individuality, and that's perhaps reflected by Venus opposition Neptune, and you kind of know it. And Neptune just has a way of working its way through anyway. So it could be, Sagittarius, that you try very hard to be reasonable, to look at things from other people's point of view, to be sociable, to be polite, and so on. But just something just slips out, and you say something or do something which just happens. And so what I'm kind of saying, Sagittarius, is you can't put a lid on your individuality, because your individuality will always find a way of expressing itself. And so probably, Sagittarius, it's best to be open and honest about who you are and what's important to you. It may get an adverse reaction, but maybe also that just can't be helped. And so Sagittarius, you're actually quite good at explaining who you are, and you can actually see this in the chart. If you look at Jupiter, Jupiter's at 9 degrees Leo, and Jupiter is 8 degrees short of a conjunction with Mercury, and it's about 9 degrees short of a conjunction of the Sun. So you can see by eye that Jupiter is on the Sun-Mercury conjunction. And so if Jupiter is... so let me make that, say it again. Jupiter is conjunct the Sun-Mercury midpoint. Sun-Mercury, is about communicating who you are. And with Jupiter on the Sun-Mercury midpoint, you have this opportunity. Not everyone is going to appreciate it. But as I said, you've got to be honest with yourself. And so if you want to spend a day with other people, or spend indeed any time with other people, I think you've got to be open and honest, and you've got to communicate what you believe in, and that is the right approach. And I think if you get a negative reaction, well, you might get a negative reaction in some quarters. In other quarters, your approach might be absolutely right, and you can potentially sort of make some new friends by being absolutely honest. And continuing on the theme of other people, Mercury is making a square to Chiron. And with Mercury making a square to Chiron, it could well be that some people are a bit under the weather. They feel sorry for themselves. They are nursing their wounds, with Chiron being a body, very much connected with wounds and the wounded healer. And it might then be a good idea to perhaps find out what's going on. It's not necessarily the case that you have to do anything, or at the very least, you can understand why people behave in the way they are behaving. Don't just look at things in terms of the surface. It may be that they are concealing some kind of wound, but that wound cannot be entirely concealed, and it is having an impact on their behavior as well as their words. Capricorn, the moon is still moving through Cancer, your opposite sign, and while moving through Cancer, the moon does make a square to Saturn. So this moon square Saturn aspect could be irritating. I mean, there may be some people who are just annoying. You don't necessarily get on with them. I mean, it's not a serious breakdown or anything like that. It's just that irritation when you're just having to deal with people that you don't really want to have to deal with. And at the moment, Capricorn, you might feel that you just would be happiest left to your own devices. But the moon is square Saturn for a reason, and you could say with moon square Saturn, there just are people that you have to engage with. It's just the way it is. And if you feel annoyed, well, maybe you shouldn't show your annoyance. Though, I think you can demonstrate your own power, your verbal power. I think, in fact, your ability to stand up for yourself and explain yourself and to communicate with power and dynamism is really, really very strong right now. And so if something upsets you or something needs to be just mentioned in no uncertain words, then now might be your chance. There's no need to hold back. So, if you feel that you're keeping something to yourself, do you really need to keep it to yourself? Okay, it might seem safest to keep it to yourself, but perhaps it's a time when, certain things just need to be expressed. And as far as, other people are concerned, we've got the moon in Cancer. Okay, the moon is going to move out of Cancer and move into Leo, and so that will create a change. On the other hand, Mars is getting ready to move into Cancer, and that happens tomorrow. Mars is moving into your opposite sign, and already you're starting to feel the fact that Mars is on the solstice point. The two solstice points, 0 degrees Cancer, 0 degrees Capricorn, and so Mars on the solstice point. It is powerful. It's about some force perhaps being unleashed. And so the question is, what do you do about that, and how does it relate to you? Well, it perhaps about getting ready for the Mars's sign change, tomorrow, and perhaps recognizing that certain people are not going to just go away. They're going to be, a permanent sort of part of the scenery, at least for the next 6 weeks. And, so patience is maybe going to be important. I mean, being patient, with other people. I do think that that's going to matter. And when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, Tuesday, I mean, I'll be going into detail about what Mars in Cancer actually means. And then we've got Venus making an opposition to Neptune. So Venus is going through Libra. It's an important planet for you right now, Venus in Libra, and it's talking about perhaps your ambitions, the way you are progressing through the world, and hopefully making things happen, making an impact. And I think you have a chance to really be quite effective about it, because Venus is in its own sign in Libra, so that's pretty good. But it's making this opposition to Neptune, and so the opposition to Neptune might relate to something that you're not fully aware of, or perhaps that you don't want to be fully aware of, that you might be keeping it to yourself, or you don't want to discuss it, you don't want to explore it. It's just something best left unexplained, and maybe even just swept under the carpet. But it's nonetheless important, because if something is being hidden, then it has its own power, and you're not in control about how that power is working through. So if there's something you're ignoring, then with Venus opposition Neptune, it could make itself felt in unexpected ways. And so if you're trying to get things together, especially in a career setting, just something might happen that you weren't necessarily expecting, that you hadn't planned for, that just seems a bit weird. And it just could be that Neptune starting to manifest. And Neptune might be about your past, or things that you've neglected about your past, or things that you're keeping to yourself that perhaps should be revealed. So yeah, it could be a negative, this Venus opposition Neptune, but I think that you have the capacity to be open about who you are, perhaps also to be open about some of your insecurities and some of your worries. And I think that's actually going to help, that openness, in terms of actually making progress. And additionally, Venus is making a trine to Pluto. I think that this Venus trine Pluto is really very constructive. It's part of a grand trine in air signs. This grand trine in air signs, it's very much in operation now. I mean, Venus makes a trine to Pluto, then it moves on. It makes a trine to Uranus, and so Venus trine Pluto means that if you get yourself together, you can have a powerful impact. You can have an impact on your world, the world around you. And Venus trine Pluto. Pluto is a planet that can be connected with money. That is sometimes forgotten. And, you think about a word like, plutocracy. Plutocracy is government by people with money, isn't it? So there is a money side to Pluto. And with Venus trine Pluto, it seems that you have an opportunity to be rewarded for what you do. If you're open and honest, you have to be clear about things. But as I've said, right now you're able to really speak your mind. And so if there's something you want, perhaps of a financial nature, you want to change the financial dynamics, then I very much think that you can. Aquarius. There is a grand trine in air signs starting to form. it involves Venus, Uranus, and Pluto. So, as you know, Pluto is in Aquarius. It's in your sign, and it's going to be in your sign for a very long time, until the 2040s. And it says something about your power, your ability to create a fortunate transformation, and to turn things around so that things work in your favor. And yeah, it's something that hopefully you take very seriously. And then Venus is making a trine to Pluto today. It's also making a trine to Uranus. Well, the exact trine between Venus and Uranus is in a couple of days' time. But Venus trine Pluto, is is a great aspect. I think it does give you real power and the ability to move beyond your immediate environment, to think about new possibilities, and perhaps to be able to benefit from outside perspectives. So the question is, you have a sense of your own power and what you could do if everything was in line, if you were given all the opportunities you needed. And some of these opportunities, they may come from elsewhere. They may come, for example, from other people. And so do listen to what people have to say, particularly if they're people who come from a different background but is very different from your own. You don't have to meet them face to face. You can read books, you can watch videos, however you want to expose yourself to new knowledge, because I think new knowledge is kind of what would right now be very helpful for you with Venus in Libra. But your transformative ability is really quite strong at the moment, and the fact that we've got this grand trine and air signs forming, you got Uranus involved, is you can create real change. Yeah, you can create turmoil, revolution, and upset. Well, maybe not upset unless it's really necessary. So you do certainly have a lot of power at your disposal. And as far as today is concerned, okay, there's nothing you absolutely have to do today. And maybe what today is all about is just preparing for the next stage, preparing to sort of up your game, to really make the real effort to create change, and just making sure that you're in the right place, that everything has been sorted out, that there aren't any loose ends. That would be a good way of dealing with today. And maybe tomorrow, once the moon moves into Leo, your position will further improve, perhaps with another person's help. But I'll be talking about that when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, Tuesday. And another thing to point out is that Mercury is making a square to Chiron. And this Mercury square Chiron, it perhaps goes back to what I was saying about other people. Other people can be helpful, perhaps. They can be thought-provoking, and I think that's perhaps the point. Mercury square Chiron. Okay, Chiron, you could see Chiron as being about wounds, but you can also see Chiron as being a disruptive energy. And so Mercury square Chiron, remembering that Mercury is in Leo, Mercury is in your opposite sign, could be about disruption coming from an outside source. But I think it's a kind of disruption that you can really benefit from, and you can interact with it, because right now, Aquarius, you're able to listen, but you're also able to communicate. And I think that right now you can communicate with incredible power and energy. So if you've got something to say, you can say it. So if you find that you are apparently provoked, someone says something or does something that you don't necessarily understand or agree with, you can give your side, you can give your viewpoint, but just be ready to get another viewpoint, something else, and perhaps there can be a dynamic interaction with other people, not just today, but over the next couple of days, that can really help to move you forward. Pisces. It's kind of nice that the moon is in Cancer. I mean, from a Piscean perspective, I mean, when the moon is in Cancer, it's a sign that, it's a water sign. It relates well to your sign, Pisces, and it's a time when you can be very clever, and you can really focus on what you are good at. But the moon does make a square to Saturn, and with the moon square Saturn, you might be aware of some of the things that might be in your way that could be holding you up. You might, for example, be wondering whether you can afford it. Afford what? Afford whatever you're trying to do. Everything has a price, and particularly now. And so it might feel that freedom and money are these two issues. Yeah, you'd like your freedom, but can you afford your freedom? Can you afford to do everything that you would like to do? And the answer is yes, of course. I mean, of course, that is the answer. And we're not talking about massive financial outlays. We may not be talking about any financial outlay at all, but it seems to bother you anyway. And, that's always a good reason not to do something, a good reason not to be creative, a good reason not to be yourself, because it always has a cost. You always got to think about money. But, when the issue of money comes up, imagination is required, the imagination to see beyond the financial pressure, and perhaps to recognize that what you thought was going to be expensive could actually be completely free. But it all depends on your attitude, and you just have to have a certain amount of flexibility. And there are many ways of doing something, and not every way has a price, or rather, not every way is expensive, and not every way costs anything at all. And some things really can be done for free. But in order to recognize that, you might have to be flexible, and just buying something at Amazon isn't necessarily the solution to everything. And so you say that's not something you really need to or should be worrying about. And use your mind. I think right now, Pisces, your mind is on pretty good form. You can think about things quite clearly, and you start to see what is possible. I mean, look at Jupiter in the chart. I mean, Jupiter is a ruler of Pisces, and you see that Jupiter is on the Sun Mercury midpoint. Mercury is around sort of 8, I don't know, something like that, 8, 7 or 8 degrees short of Jupiter. Jupiter is 9 degrees short of the Sun, so you put that together, and you see that Jupiter is on the Sun Mercury midpoint. Sun Mercury is about expressing who you are, and so with Jupiter on the Sun Mercury midpoint, you can really be yourself, and you can tell everyone who you are, and you can tell everyone how you want things to be. And so if you've got ideas about the way you want things organized, Pisces, then go ahead. I think that you should be able to get things together, really, very quickly. Now, one aspect or two aspects we've got today, which I think perhaps need to be mentioned, is the fact that we've got Venus opposition Neptune and Venus trine Pluto. And Venus opposition Neptune. Well, Venus opposition Neptune might take us right back to money. I mean, I've already sort of talked about money, and that you might be slightly concerned about money. And Venus opposition Neptune perhaps indicates that you shouldn't take what other people say too seriously, particularly on the subject of money. There's a lot of distraction and subterfuge here with Venus opposition Neptune, and people may be playing games, and it's perhaps easy to fall for things. So if you find that there's pressure of a financial nature, or if you think that something is too complicated, then it probably is too complicated. And so possibly Pisces with Venus opposition Neptune, you should be trying to make things as simple as possible, but not too simple. Because if you make something of a financial nature too simple, you just ignore some very important complications which need to be addressed. You make things simple, but in the process you miss things out, and that could lead to mistakes. Additionally, Venus is making a trine to Pluto. That Venus trine Pluto is quite an unconscious aspect, and with Venus trine Pluto, there are things going on behind the scenes. There are things you are thinking about. There are transformations taking place at quite a high level. You feel that change is happening, that change is unfolding, but you're not quite sure how it's working, and that may take some further reflection. So overall, Pisces, it is a somewhat complicated day, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. And tomorrow there are other things to think about. I mean, tomorrow, well, one thing is that Mars is about to leave Gemini, and I think Mars leaving Gemini, that's good. I mean, Mars in Gemini, it has been somewhat unstable, destabilizing for many Pisceans. It may say something about what's been going on at home, what's been going on regarding your family, and so if there have been issues in that area, don't worry, because Mars is about to move into Cancer, and I think that Mars moving into Cancer for you could be a breath of fresh air, or Cancer is a water sign, so a gulp of fresh water perhaps. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 10, which is treading. This is about where we put our feet. It's certainly about trying to make progress, and we're thinking perhaps about taking some kind of initiative, and we feel it's necessary. But the question is, how do we go about it? And we do have two moving lines. The bottom line moves, and also the fifth line moves. So with the bottom line moving, we're talking about first steps. It's at the beginning of the hexagram. It's what we do first of all. And so, if we are dealing with the tiger, if we're walking past the tiger, we're aware of the dangers, and we also want to keep things simple, just as simple as possible. And so we're not going to be making any sort of extravagant moves to begin with. Yeah, it is those first steps, and we don't want to get too close to the tiger, and with that simplicity, and we have a certain humility to what we're doing. I don't think we're going to tread on anything too dangerous, because we're being careful. But then the fifth line moves, and the fifth line means that we're becoming more confident, because we have to be more confident. We realize or feel that this is the time for the big move. This does need to be done. But at the same time, we are aware of a growing danger, because the higher you go up this hexagram, the greater the danger. And we've moved to the fifth line. And so, we have to think that if we were to go further, we would be creating a greater risk for ourselves. The higher we go, the greater the distance we have to fall. And so the question is, how do we negotiate this tiger? And do we really want to go further than the threshold even. We walk through the door, we see the tiger, and we might think, well, that's probably as far as we're going to go. But kind of if you want to go further, well, it might be a risk. So think about that in terms of what you are doing today. Do you really want to go through with things today? Maybe tomorrow is a better day. We looked at today astrologically. It's a somewhat treacherous day because Venus opposition Neptune can create a certain amount of confusion. Plus we've got the moon making a square to Saturn, and the moon in Cancer. Well, maybe we should wait until the moon goes into Leo. So don't feel that you have to do anything or see anything through today, because treading, we have to be really careful where you tread. You don't want to tread on a tiger's tail. If you tread on a tiger's tail, you might get bitten, and so it might be better to hold back. This hexagram does move. It moves to a second hexagram, which is kind of complementary or obvious almost, and it moves to hexagram 64, which is before completion. And this kind of tells us what's going on. By the end of the day, we would have realized we just haven't finished something. But before completion is about you've got this big task, crossing the great water, as the I Ching likes to say, crossing the river, but we haven't got to the other bank because we know that things are dangerous. We looked at the previous hexagram, treading. We don't necessarily want to go all the way, right now. I think we need to wait. So I think that's how we should see it. We're not going to finish things today. And if you try to finish things today, then things might go wrong because you've just taken on too much. And so it's best to wait and allow things to clarify. And you can move to some extent. You can move, one foot forward. Just try to understand what's going on. Have a look at the danger ahead of you, but I wouldn't go all the way. I would wait until, at the very least, wait until tomorrow. And that's it. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. As you might know, I have just launched the sort of membership channel. I think, if you want to join that, I do put out an extra video every week, which will last at least 15 minutes. And the membership channel has one level, which is $4.99. I don't know. You might have to pay some tax on top of that as well. I don't know, but anyway, I think the basic price is $4.99. So that might be something you want to consider. But if you're not interested in memberships, well, it's not going to change anything in terms of this channel. I'm always going to put out my daily forecasts, and they're always going to be available. So with the membership channel, I'm just putting some extra material out. I'm not suddenly denying material to non-members. So anyway, that's something you might want to consider. And so that's it. And I hope you have a good Monday, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.